How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Blue Shifting. Welcome back to Higurashi When They Cry, Chapter 4. It's Himatsubushi. Okay, so I've apparently not got quite the right image or message from this, as many of you are quick to point out. Basically, based on the title screen and the idea that this is basically named like the time-wasting chapter, it has the whole thing where it's just like, oh, like it doesn't really matter. Like you can cast the story aside if you wish or not. I thought it meant it was more apocryphal, basically meaning it added to the story, it gave some context to the story, but whether it was like true canon or something that would be impactful for like needing to understand the rest of the story. For example, the implication being if you skipped this chapter, you wouldn't miss very much. It was more of like a kind of a fun glimpse of stuff, and especially when kicked off by going into the passage, looking at like the atmosphere and the situation surrounding the dam and the protests, which is very interesting, very, very cool. But because it has no direct like correlation with Keiichi or any of his friends, like in that regard, like, I mean, it has an effect, but not like, it's very unlikely we're going to meet like characters, too many characters from that time period. Maybe we will, but it's still several years beforehand. Even like Mion talks about the time how her involvement in all that was going on in Hinamizawa at the time was fairly minimal because she was pretty young. Who knows though? Like I imagine we're going to see a lot of characters that we know. I just meant that it's not going to be as impactful because it's going to be focusing more on just like the events around the dam. Or at least that's what I thought. Apparently not. Apparently a lot of you say no. This is very important and it is canon. It's just. It wasn't a planned story, at least at this time, to come out initially, but it was shared, and like we just kind of talked about it, which is good. So I'm going to take it seriously. Don't think I'm dismissing of this. In fact, I'm very excited to read about this, but it definitely gave me the wrong impression of what this story was supposed to be. Again, this could be translation errors. It could be just my misinterpretation of things. Regardless, I'm taking it seriously. So we are a young detective whose wife just gave birth to our first child, but right when this is happening, there's an investigation. We suspect that a high political figure in Tokyo is being blackmailed and had their child kidnapped. So we're trying to investigate potential people who might be putting pressure on a like high member of the government. You know, the major concern being, very standard Cold War era fears of the communists. So, but because it's less likely to be connected and being younger, it's a high priority mission. But we've been sent to Hinamizawa because there is a collection of very pushy protesters that are getting more and more creeping closer and closer to truly violent. So they still should be investigated. And like when we initially get there, like to talk to the local police, they're like, oh yeah, though they're we've been keeping an eye on them. They could go south. So he's like, all right, I gotta take this seriously. So now we're going in. I don't know if this game's going to be set up very similarly to the others where it's going to have tips or anything in between chapters. I'm not even sure if the chapter's layouts is going to be all that similar. In fact, maybe I stopped right before the end of a chapter, and if so, I'll get that answer. But for now, we'll just push forward. I'm excited. I'm going to go through this. Oh, I guess I will say real quick that unless something goes very wrong, we will take a bit of a break for a week. I was able to acquire tickets to a convention, specifically one that's hosted by one of my favorite authors, Brandon Sanderson. It's Dragon Steel Nexus. Happens in Utah. It's for a weekend, but weekend is when I record stuff because that's like my free time when I don't have work. So I will probably just have a week where I take a break off because I'm going to be enjoying myself at a convention. But then we'll be coming right back. I plan to do a lot of recording and stuff through the holiday, and in fact I do want to do some kind of live stream type activity during the Christmas break of some kind. I've got some really fun stuff to share at Showcase. Let's just say I've started cooking on a project I've been threatening to for a while, and I want to actually showcase some of like a sneak peek into what I've been doing and get your feedback on it. And then of course, talking about what's coming up in the next year. And I'll be honest, like we're getting really close to the end of Chaos Head. we're really on the precipice of that finale, so keep an eye out for that. Anyway, jumping right in, let's get going. My destination was Shishiban City, XX Prefecture, an area under control of the Onagafuchi Guardians. And Okonomiya Police Station was right on the front lines. Oh yeah, so I was 2 clicks away from the end of the chapter. Dang it! I hate how that happens. I'm sorry. Alright, so are we gonna get tips or not? Oh, maybe not. Maybe it's not even the end of the chapter yet. It feels like an end of a chapter. Shishiban City was, as far as provincial cities went, rather behind the times. Okonomiya, recessed in the mountains, was even more remote. With little change between the seasons, all that was left was the tepid passage of time and made for a rather drab town. There were no tourist attractions or local delicacies. Without even a strong religious regional industry, it was simply dull. Just looking at the monotonous and peaceful townscape, it was hard to catch a glimpse of the radical resistance of the Onagafuchi Guardians. The atmosphere of boredom didn't hint at the Okonomiya police station of being on the front lines of a dam conflict, nor of the numerous incidents that I had heard about at the prefecture headquarters.
おはようございます。違反金の納付ですか？
いえ、公安部の本田屋さんにアポイントがあります。
KK.
赤坂とお伝えください。
失礼しました。少々お待ちください。
The clerk, who I thought was here for a parking violation at first glance, after fumbling with the unfamiliar extension number, told the person on the line they had a visitor.
どうもどうも。赤坂さんでいらっしゃいますか？縁のはるばるお疲れ様でした。こんな部屋で申し訳ありませんね。応接室を押さえてあったんですがね。議員さんが突然お越しになっちゃったんで追い出されちゃいまして。
I would hesitate to call where we were a conference room, as it was very small and cluttered. The cramped space was packed with lockers. I had an impression that it was more of a change room that doubled as one for smoking. Listening to his crude chortles, I didn't get much the feeling that Honda was the head of the local public safety division, was much of an intellectual. But I knew that in exchange he had both experience and absolute confidence in his instincts.
ご多忙中、突然お邪魔して申し訳ありませんでした。警視庁から参りました。赤坂と申します。よろしくお願いします。
公安部の本田屋です。よろしくよろしく。県警防隊の3階部長から協力を惜しむなと脅されておりますので。
Threatened, huh?
防隊？県警の暴力団対策本部ですか？
うちじゃ鬼ヶ淵支所の連中は暴力団の延長に位置づけてますんでね。
It's still interesting. Like it does make sense, but it's so weird thinking of the Sonozakis as a yakuza. I mean, it makes sense. The yakuza literally is crime family, so it makes sense. But like, I can't help but feel like the yakuza from the Yakuza series, which I'm sure is not even a fair representation of an actual mafia Yakuza family, but at the same time, I just can't help but just imagine Majima strolling into town. That'd be amazing.
あれを善意の住民運動だなんてあんた、東城もいいとこですわ。
Okay. They said to the prefecture office, too, that Onagafuchi Guardians were linked to the local mob. If I recall correctly, the adopted son of somebody influential was the lieutenant in that gang.
そりゃ逆。全然逆ですよ。暴力団の活動があって、それに住民団体が大義名分みたいにくっついていると、そういう風に考えてください。
So it's a shell game.
逆。
Honda was just about rolling with laughter. This is slightly different than the info given to me at the prefecture office, but somebody embedded locally would be more knowledgeable. While we were talking, occasionally some people who seemed to be detectives would come in and change. One of these individuals, noticing Hondaya's guffaws, came up to us. Hey! Finally, I imagined we were going to meet him at some point. I'm surprised it took this long.
おお、クラちゃん、ちょうどよかった。クラちゃんも入ってよ。こちら、はるばる東京の警視庁からお見えになった赤坂警部。
警部だなんて。まだまだ新米です。赤坂です。よろしくお願いします。
初々しいのがいいですね。採用は今年ですか？
I couldn't help but think I was being ridiculed, so I only responded with a forced smile. I could tell that this new person was like Hondaya, a type who had confidence in their instincts and experience. I really didn't like those types of people.
赤坂さんにもご紹介します。こちらは刑事部の大石君。赤坂さんがお問い合わせの S 号の件なら彼が詳しい
The
で
S
す。
file. Again, they talk about that.
S 号
Sonozaki.
園崎の S 号ってのはですね、園崎家が関連している件を示す、まあ
It's going hard on the mysterious
暗号みたいなもんなんです。
music already. Sonozaki. Come to think of it, I remember when I was poring over documents at headquarters, there were quite a few people with the last name Sonozaki popping up.
確か園崎氏は鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の役員でしたね。確か会計だったと思います。
The two of them were surprised when I rattled off what posts the Sonozaki held. After a moment, both of them erupted into laughter.
赤坂さんでしたっけあなたお勉強家さんですね。ひょっとして同盟の連中の主要人物
暗記というほどではありませんが、一応鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の幹部リストは一読しました。
Interesting. So the Onagafuchi Guardians, they are a protesting group, but they are making their records really public. I wonder if that's common. I've never been involved in a protest group of any kind, but I've never really considered that they would I mean, maybe the heads would be public about stuff, like the leaders, because they need to be, just to make sure that they can organize stuff. But it just feels very it feels way more official than I would expect.
じゃあ会長と副会長は
会長は現hinamizawa村村長の君吉喜一郎氏。
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. He would be heavily involved.
副会長は鳥海神社部長の古出氏。
Oh my gosh, yeah.
会計が園崎を領して、会計監査は牧野氏。
But wait. The vice president was the priest of the shrine, so that's Rika's dad, right? But wasn't he eventually he was eliminated because he eventually changed sides, right? Because this makes it sound like he was defending the place, but he was eliminated because he had been one who said that maybe they should let the dam project move forward, right? Oryu Sonozaki. And the auditor is Makino. Oryo Sonozaki. That sounds so familiar. Who is that? Oryu.
教頭部長が君吉義郎氏。広報部長が園崎貞夫氏。
Oh, wait. Oryu Sonozaki. I think that's Mion's grandma. That's why that sounds familiar. She's the one that is basically the head of the whole Sonozaki clan. And then Sadao. I don't remember that Sadao.
赤坂さん、あなたなかなかやりますね。給料安いけどうちに来ませんうちに一番必要で一番いないタイプですよで、ちなみに園崎貞夫は青年部長なんです。惜しいですね。広報部長は園崎忠孝。
Right. Feeling like I wasn't being complimented at all, I started settling into an uncomfortable mood. However, I was becoming more and more aware that I was the weakest link in this investigation, so I just had to bear with it. I didn't mean for that feeling to show up on my face, but the crafty detectives didn't let that slip by.
バカにしたつもりはないんです。
That is the thing he's really strong at, is reading faces.
詫びと言っち
Kind
ゃ
of
な
getting a
んで
read
す
on
が
people.
なんでしたら村を実際にご案内しましょう。
For somebody with no feel to the area like me, that would be great help. I couldn't have asked for more.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟っていうのは結局hinamizawa村の対外的な別称に過ぎません。村を知ることがあなたのお仕事の近道だと思いますよ。
Okay.
いかがです？
The residential movement, in other words, had influence over the whole region. So the leader of the movement was the leader of that influence. Just like that, the thought process in the region would become the overall personality of the movement. Just like Oiishi had said, in order to learn what they were really like, this regional force behind the dam protests, getting to know the village was the quickest way.
よろしくお願いします。
Nothing back without Nodding back without skipping a beat, Oiishi laughed with satisfaction and stood up. Here we go. If I took the information I learned from the prefecture office and from Hondaya to heart, my position was exposed, my personal safety was at risk. The opponent was an extremist group that had no qualms about using threats or violence against somebody. If my personal info was leaked, it would be hard to imagine I'd be in danger whether on the it wouldn't be hard to imagine I'd be in danger whether on the job or not. Thinking that, I felt a little nervous.
連中は顔覚えるの早いですからね。私と一緒にいるところを見られると多分月並みですがね。こいつを身につけておいてください。
Oh. Oiishi had to be an incredibly suspicious disguise comprised of a baseball cap, sunglasses, and a mask. I didn't want to get all hot and stuffy, but Oishi's warning was probably right on the money. Considering that, I put them on with appreciation. I looked so suspicious that Oiishi had to smile wryly.
どこまで話しましたかね。
御三家という旧家が村を支配している
Right.
というところまでです。
The three. The Onogafuchi guardians were the same as the village of Hinamizawa itself, meaning there was a direct correlation between the executive in the alliance and being a leader in the village, as Hondaya had told me a short time ago. If the village is ruled by three ancient families, then it would mean the Onogafuchi guardians were ruled by the same three families.
県警の資料には何て書いてありました？死守同盟のリーダー格とかそういうことについて。
The documents I was using were classified. If I responded to Oishi's question, it'd be a breach of security. However, most likely, the man I judged was more well-versed in the situation than any of the documents of the prefectural police department, so I decided to answer him.
同盟の会長は現村長の君吉喜一郎と。
Right. Oiishi, upon hearing that, let out a small chuckle. For him to ask like that, to laugh at the answer as it was recorded in the documents, meant that wasn't the case in reality.
では君吉氏以外の影の人物がいる県警の持ついや一般的な情報とは異なり
I think he was like the mayor clearly was almost always a figurehead.
君吉のじいさんなんてただのお飾りですよ。そもそもこの村じゃ村長なんてポスト自体も形式だけなんです。
Right.
つまり同盟も村も本当の意味で支配している別の存在がいるということですね。
Put your money down into Sonozaki. Easy bet.
それが先ほどおっしゃられていた御三家。
まあそのあたりはこれからご説明します。
All of a sudden, with a thunk, the car suddenly lurched. The paved road had given way to a gravel one. At the same time, the scenery outside the window changed. The Hinamizawa Dam project must be withdrawn. Overthrow the shameless puppet of the governor. The dam will submerge the natural beauty of Hinamizawa. Protect the village from the unethical dam. Fear the wrath of Oyashiro-sama's curse. There it is. There it is. Demolish the dam. These invaders must go away. The construction office must respond. The construction office manager must negotiate with us. Signs and banners crowded the roadside. Even reading the brush-scrawled words were daunting. It was as though the world was just changed with a border with a different country. At that moment, I was startled by the car suddenly braking. Looking ahead, a barricade had been erected. About 5 or 6 protesters wearing masks and helmets to hide their faces were blocking the road, yelling at us angrily to stop.
これは何ですか？検問？
はあ？懲りない連中だな。
Oiishi snorted as he rolled down the window and leaned out.
おいおいおい。あんたらダメだよこんなとこで道を塞いじゃ。
As Oiishi glared at them with a malicious laugh, they visibly faltered.
道開けそれじゃ通れないでしょ。
Who would have thought that it was Oishi's car? That panic thought seemed to make them lose their presence of mind.
大石刑事の車と分かってればこんなご無礼はしなかったんですが
This is
ね。
odd. Why are they being so respectful to him? I thought he was their enemy.
大石刑事、いつもの車はどうされました？車検ですか？
そんなところです。台車ってのはどうにも馴染みませんね。
Judging from their brief conversation, I could guess that they were familiar with the license plate of the car Oiishi normally used. In other words, they knew the car belonged to the police, they would have hidden the barricade. What they were doing was obviously obstruction of traffic. Oh, okay. So maybe they're worried because he literally has a legitimate claim to be able to arrest them. Because they can put up the barricade to hinder people, then they complain to the police, and before the police arrive, they take the barricade down. Can't be proven that they were doing anything wrong, thus they can't get in trouble, but they can kind of, it's harassment to, like, you know, prove a point. I get that. A blatant crime.
そっちの怪しい男は誰です？あんた、顔を見せてくれませんか？
The man glared at me menacingly, wearing a mask and sunglasses made me look particularly dubious. Would that showing my face get me some unnecessary trouble? I turned to Oiishi to see what I should do.
彼の顔は勘弁してあげてください。まだまだ新米でシャイなんですからね。
不審な輩じゃないか確認しようってだけです。最近のひなみ様は物騒ですからね。
あんたのうち鏡歪んでるのと違います。
Fair.
あんたのその面の方がよっぽど不審ですよ。な。
The man and Oiishi continued to talk like that, feigning smiles at one another. However, from the beginning to the end, I couldn't get over the feeling I was sitting in a powder keg.
ゴミの不法投棄車両まだ減らないんですか？オタクたちも本当に朝晩大変ですね。
警察の方にもご理解とご協力をいただけて助かりますよ。
Oh my gosh, the tension. During that conversation, the barricade was moved, leaving a gap wide enough for a single car to get through. Oiishi lightly honked the horn once, began to roll the car forward. I could see the man's antagonistic glares on the back of the car at the rearview mirror.
何
Sheesh.
ですかさっきのは。
Welcome to the valley.
勝手に行動を封殺するなんて。
もちろん犯罪目くじら立てても始まりませんがね。連中の主張じゃですね、村内に不法投棄をするトラックが出没するって言うんです。それを封じ込めるために不審車両を検問してるって話だそうで。
I see.
不法投棄？参拝を勝手に捨てようとする悪徳業者のことですか？
警察が何の手も打たないから自分たちで自衛するっていう論法でしてね。まあ参拝なんて話はどうせ自演だからどうでもいいんですがね。
Oh, so you think the village was dumping?
自演？
連中うまい作戦なんですよ。ダム現場にですね、工事妨害のために参拝ゴミを自分たちでばらまいてるんです。
Okay, so they caused the problem to slow down the dam construction, and then they use the illegal dumping as an excuse to also harass the dam construction. That's kind of a clever build-up, actually, if you think about it.
で、それを悪徳業者のせいってことにして臨検を設置すると。それで工事車両をいちいち足止めしてチクチクと妨害してるってわけなんです。
It's actually a clever scheme if you think about it.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の抵抗運動の一つというわけですね。
多分今の検問でこの車のナンバーが割れましたからね。もうこの先には一切検問の真似事はないと思います。連中も私を怒らせると得をしないことだけはよーく骨身に染みているようですからね。
That's been something I've been curious about too. Why does Oiishi command such respect, like the fearful kind of respect with the people in the valley? Like you'd think that he'd be a prime target for them. Why have they grown to fear him, but they wouldn't dare eliminate him?
この車が工事関係車両だと知れるとですね、散々検問で足止めを食らうばかりか、投石や鉄釘のばらまきなんかも食らうって噂です。
Oh boy.
あなたも身元が割れないようにせいぜい気をつけた方がいいですよ。公安なんてバレたらどんな目に遭うやら。
Oishi's acting like we were talking about something fun, but for me it was no laughing matter.
まるでどこぞの内戦の国に迷い込んだような錯覚です。
Guerrilla warfare.
あんた、そりゃうまい言い方です。今言われたのはまさにその通り。
Oiishi turned to me with a grin and menacing laugh.
ここはね、戦争地帯なんですよ。
Yeah. The car slowed down a bit as we went down a narrow road through some farmland.
あそこの森の中に家があるのが見えます。古い感じの。
Looking at where Oiishi was pointing, there certainly was an old traditional designed house.
あれが村長の君吉のじいさんの家です。君吉本家とも言いますな。分家筋が多いですから、御三家の一つにあたります。
御三家、Hinamizawa村を支配している旧家。
そうそう。で、もう一つが古出家。こっちは分家どころか、もう神主一家しか残ってませんがね。ちょうどあっちの方にね、そこの神主をしています。ちなみにね、死守同盟の事務所はその神社の敷地内にあります。
Guardian's office. I think that is where, like, eventually, isn't that where Rika and Satoko eventually live? Is like in the old, like the building that was this office? The office of the Onagafuchi Guardians. If these guys were the enemy, that would make the shrine their stronghold.
そこを見ることはできますか？
神社は古出家の私有地でね、警察といえど令状がないと踏み込めません。電柱のバックには村の息のかかった議員もいますからね。
Gotcha.
警察にも強いところと弱いところがあるってことです。御三家とは言ってもですね、そりゃあだいぶ大昔のことなんだそうです。大昔はその御三家ってのは合議して村のいろいろなことを決めてたらしいですな。
ということは、今は違うということですね。
あんた、いちいち察しがいいですね。さすが高学歴。
The car braked to a halt with a squeal. Ahead of where we stopped were several signs. Private property beyond, no trespassing. Beware of poisonous snakes. Danger, turn back. Intruders will be charged an entry fee of 1,000,000 yen. Okay. Signs are erected with things like that written on them. The road was separated from the forest by a chain link fence wrapped in barbed wire.
私有地なんで、ここまでです。
Barbed wire?
この先は監視カメラがいくつも仕掛けられてます。
This is obviously the Sonozaki like main house that we've seen before, but I don't remember it being barbed wired up.
うっかり道に迷いました。なんて論法が通じる相手じゃありませんからね。
この先が、そうなんですね。
The people currently controlling Hinamizawa and Onagafuchi Guardians were neither the Kimiyoshi family nor the Furude family, but the last of the three.
この先にあるのが御三家の一つ、園崎家。Hinamizawa村を影から支配する連中です。
Among the list of executives recorded in the document, the number of people whose last name from the three families was quite high. Of course, Sonozaki was no exception. However, at the top was the Kimiyoshi family. If the Kimiyoshi family seemed to be in charge, the rulers behind the scenes were the Sonozaki family. The double-layered structure implicitly told me that this village had both a light and dark side.
園崎家の頂点は、現当主の園崎お涼っていうばあさんです。園崎天皇なんて呼ばれるくらいに、その発言には影響力があるそうです。
Yeah, I'm glad I remembered her name right.
気をつけてくださいよ。市長だって最敬礼でお迎えするような VIP ですからね。
And she's the treasurer, which is actually a really great position because, like, it doesn't make her a figurehead, but she controls the money, which is exactly what the Sonozakis do, is they control the money. And that speaks volumes. Because if your treasurer could just tell you, no, we're going to do this or else we don't get funding, she basically is in charge. But on paper, it doesn't look like it. The treasurer just sounds like a functional position.
まあ、Hinamizawaと周辺の町に住む村の親族の数千の評伝を固めてるわけですから。
つまり、その人物が鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の事実上のトップということですね。
Yes.
そうなります。
At those words, Oiishi pulled out a well-worn cigarette box. The suspected kidnapping of the minister's grandchild and subsequent threats, were these parts of a hidden plot by the Onagafuchi Guardians in order to have the Hinamizawa Dam project cancelled?
あなた、東京からはるばる調べにいらしたんですよね。
ええ、そうですか。何か。
じゃあほら、犬飼大臣への直訴事件の絡みですかな。要するに、あれで要注意団体ってことで公安がマークすることになったと。
Guy, so sharp.
そういう感じですか。
大石さんこそ、 お察しが早くて助かります。
While exhaling our cigarette smoke, Oiishi smiled broadly, just like I just pulled off a good one on him. Or so I thought. His smile disappeared suddenly.
嘘でしょ。だから、直訴事件でマークがついたっての、嘘でしょ？
Oiishi knew there was no way Tokyo HQ would dispatch an investigator over something as minor as a direct appeal. If they were to dispatch someone, it had to be for more dire reason. He had figured out that as much. I thought of myself as the type of person who doesn't let things show on their face. In front of his watchful gaze, however, I felt like what I was thinking was completely laid bare. Oiishi silently lit another cigarette as if waiting for me to interject during the awkward pause. I see. So this was where a veteran detective's way of getting someone to spill information. But as long as I realized this, there would be nothing more. If I didn't open my mouth, I wouldn't have to lose anything. God, you'd think. What, did it sit in silence for a while? All I had to do was stare out the window and enjoy the scenery until Oiishi gave up.
あなたって人は、本当に隠し事が下手な人ですね。そういう素直で初々しいの、悪くないな。
Oiishi smirked as he twisted out his third cigarette while I tried not to let him notice I had yielded completely. At first I thought I had won, but at the very least Oiishi had ascertained that I was hiding something. Meaning that I might have ended up marching to his tune. Oiishi started up the engine once again and began to move the car.
素直なところを教えてくれりゃ、もっとお力になれると思ったんですがね。
素直に話したら
If the cat was out of the bag,
clearly.
If the cat was out of the bag, might as well use it to catch some mice.
内容によりけりですがね。Hinamizawa界隈に詳しい情報屋に引き合わせてあげてもいいですよ。
Okay.
協力員
Oh, is that how the Furudes get involved? Like, so they're involved in the Guardians, but maybe they're like doing some backdoor deals with the police.
そっか。あんたらはそう呼ぶんでしたね。
どうして私の任務に興味を？大石さん。
そりゃ、あんたと同じです。常に知るのが私たちの仕事じゃありませんか。
Being able to meet with Oishi's informant was an extremely compelling opportunity. We were looking to recruit somebody familiar with the area to collaborate with for intelligence. In the end, there was no better method for finding people than asking. We were always taught, however, that the rank-and-file police were no better than monkeys. Unlike us, they were careless with confidential cases. We looked down on them like they'd run the mouth off in a drunken stupor. Oiishi was an outlaw even amongst them, and here I was lost on whether or not I should tell him about the kidnapping of a minister's grandson. I mean,
その情報協力員はどの程度鬼ヶ淵自主同盟に精通を？
I mean, you don't have to tell him everything. But you could be like, we believe that there are forces and motions that are greater than the area. We're simply checking all the possible leads. One of them leads us to the Guardians. And it's been clear, since I got here, that they might be capable of doing something more dramatic than simply protesting and blocking roads. We're here to try and see if they have any connection to any untoward actions that have been happening in Tokyo, and try and get ahead of anything that might happen in the near future. Like, why can't you just say that? He'd know it's basically BS, but it'd be a realistic answer that he couldn't really contend with right now, rather than just quartering us constantly into basically answering by not answering, because by not saying anything, we're basically confirming what he's suspecting.
あんたも公安の人間ならわかるでしょう。そんなの私の口からたとえあなたにだって話せるわけないじゃありませんか。
Protect your sources. That was the first principle of dealing with confidential information. In that regard, it seemed Oiishi wasn't one of the monkeys. Should I trust him, ask him for help, or not?
あなたは国、私は金に雇われてますがね。私たちの職務はそう大きくは違わないと思っています。力になれると思うんですがね。
Yeah. However, I had trouble believing the crafty old man would simply help me just like he claimed. Now, how should I go about this?
大石さんほどの方が無償で力になってくださるとはちょっと思いがたいですが。
そりゃ下心がないわけじゃないです。あんたらは確か協力員に支払える謝礼用の予算を持ってますよね。
Interesting.
領収書不要な予算を。そいつでですね、情報屋との接触にかかるコストをちょいと。
Just a little bit.
つまり情報屋と渡りをつける謝礼を取引内容が明快で助かります。
He certainly was something else for being able to brazenly stake his ulterior motive like this. Rather than him doing it out of the kindness of his heart, everything was a lot clearer that he was being compensated for his deal. I felt like he was the type of man who was good at these backroom dealings.
誤解しないでくださいよ。お金が必要なのは私にじゃなくて情報屋になんですからね。
Okay, so then why do I have to give it to you? Why can't I give it to your informant?
まあ支払いの関係上、お金は私が預かりますがね。
支払いはいつ？
今すぐがいいですね。ないなら明日でもいいんですよ。
I pulled out a wallet that was different from my personal one. The price was pretty much fixed depending on what kind of information I was paying for. In this case, the payment was upfront. Also considering the fact I didn't know what kind of info I'd get, I shouldn't pay too much. When I suggested that, Oiishi suddenly stretched out his hand and tightly grasped the contents of the wallet.
こういう時はですね、ケチケチしない方がいいんです。
This is just robbery!
大丈夫大丈夫。損はさせませんから。
わかりました。ケチケチしないことにします。
で、調べたい情報は何です？内容によって多少アプローチが変わることもありますので。
他言無用を誓ってもらえますか、大石さん。
誓うまでもありませんよ。私もあなたたちと同じ。職務上知り得たことは他言できませんからね。わかりましたよ。ここで聞くことは他言無用です。それにあなたのおかげで溜まってたツケを全部返せるんですからね。私は少なくとも金の絡んだ約束は絶対に違いませんよ。
God, I feel so dirty. I never thought I was a dirty cop before, but he feels like he is. I was still unsure if I should trust him until the very last moment, but in the end I broke down. Oiishi wasn't the type of guy I could trust 100%, but there was no mistaking he had access to underground information networks. In order to accomplish my mission swiftly, I needed his cooperation. I set my resolve.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟がある事件に関与しているか否かを調査しています。
ある事件？
犬飼建設大臣が何者かに脅迫を受けている可能性があります。
可能性とはまた遠回しな言い方ですね。
Be like, there's a reason why I have to be a bit roundabout.
大臣の近辺に内通者がいるらしいのです。その内通者によって高度に監視されているらしく、大臣は脅迫初期から屈服している様子です。警察へも我々へも。
なるほど。だから脅迫を受けている可能性という言い方になると。
Basically saying allegedly.
だとすると妙ですね。大臣が誰にも通報しないなら、どうしてあんたらは事件を知ったんです？
I don't know, Oiishi. How do you have money to pay an informant? We didn't spy on the minister's private life, but we'd never found out.
その説明は、私が情報屋に提供する必要がないと思われるので、割愛します。
Oiishi had apparently caught on and quietly chuckled when I refused to explain.
なるほど。大臣の近辺にスパイがいるらしいから、公安だけの極秘調査ということになったわけですか。そりゃあ確かに穏便な話じゃないですね。
ことを公にすれば、大臣の政治生命も含め、政変に発展する可能性は極めて高いでしょう。犯人グループの目的がそこにあるならば、有識事態に発展する可能性があります。
Oh yeah, if that were the perpetrator's aim, they don't have to do much more. Like they could just kind of pull the trigger on this anytime.
政府の列島改造は、まあいろいろ方々との衝突も多いらしいですからね。どんなささやかなケチでも一つつけば、野党勢力がドット票を伸ばす可能性もあると。
大臣がどのような要求を受けているのかは、ですが、脅迫の方法だけは、ほぼ分かっています。
何です？
大臣の孫の誘拐です。周辺は否定していますが、最後の目撃から見て、すでに誘拐後72時間が経過していると思われます。
3日ですか。波の身代金目的ならもう決着してますね。
金銭でなく、大臣に何らかの政治的なアクションを要求している可能性が極めて高いでしょう。
Right, and it takes time to get that stuff to move.
それを我々は黙認するわけにはいきません。
で、 それの犯人グループとの可能性として鬼ヶ淵死守同盟がリストに上がったわけですね。
そうです。
大臣の孫を誘拐してダム計画の撤回を求めるか。
It sounds so extreme, but it also is so not beyond what they're capable of.
どうでしょう、大石さん。その可能性はあなたから見てあり得ると思いますか？
Oiishi seemed to ponder the idea for a while. The section chief at the regional office had responded immediately with, "It's possible." However, Oiishi, who was well informed about the matter, was hemming and hawing. Finally, just a little bit. He said something that was really just a little bit strange.
明治前まではですね、この辺りはHinamizawa村って名前じゃなくて鬼ヶ淵村って呼ばれてたそうです。
It is really odd that he brings this up now.
うちのばあ様の受け売りですがね。
This topic was so completely and suddenly unrelated to the subject of the kidnapping of the minister's grandson that I was taken slightly aback.
鬼ヶ淵村。それで鬼ヶ淵死守同盟という名称になったわけですね。
鬼ヶ淵村ってのはですね、人食い鬼の住む村だと言われてたんだそうです。今でも村人は自分の体に鬼の血が半分流れてると信じてます。
Right.
人食い鬼。大石さん、それ何の話ですか？
情報ですよ。さっきあなたからたくさんもらっちゃいましたからね。少しもらいすぎました。その分サービスしてあげてるんですよ。
Oiishi finally smiled, but it didn't seem like he was fooling around.
先を続けてください。
人食い鬼たちはですね、普段は仙人と崇められてひっそりと暮らしているんですがね、やっぱり人食いですから定期的に麓の村に降りてきては獲物をさらっていったんだそうです。それをですね、鬼隠しと言いまして。
Demoned away. It was the first time I'd heard such a peculiar phrase. However, I felt something slightly ominous from the horrifying tale of demons abducting people in order to eat them.
ほら、よく世間一般に神隠しっていうのがあるじゃないですか。
Yeah.
人がある日突然失踪してしまうとそう言うでしょ。この辺りでは同じことがあると鬼隠しって呼ぶんです。
その昔話と本件に。
いえいえ、直接的には何の関係もない、ただのおしゃべりですがね。ただ、
Ka-thump, ka-thump. The car shook, and at some point the gravel road had changed to a paved one.
ただ、何です？
この土地に鬼隠しという名の失踪、誘拐を暗示するキーワードがあるということだけはお話ししておこうと思いまして。
It's a code.
今回の大臣の孫の誘拐と関係あるかは分かりませんがね、まあ深い話ではないんです。そんな言われの話があるということだけでもね。
Under Kakushi, human-eating demons coming down from the foothills to abduct their prey. Then, in order to cancel the dam project that threatened to submerge the village they lived in, they demon away the minister's grandson. Then, had they already made an example of the minister's grandson and eaten him alive?
ちょっと興味深い昔話ですね。
鬼たちの村にみだりに踏み入ればたちまち囚われ食い殺される。だから鬼ヶ淵村には近づくな。今時の若者はこんな迷信信じませんがね、沖宮の明治生まれの年寄り連中には今でも真面目に信じてるのが多いですよ。
Hinamizawa village was feared by the people in the area. I recalled that piece of information and heard from the Prefectural Public Safety Division.
何しろこの辺は田舎ですからね、迷信なんかが平気で幅を利かせてるんです。東京から来られた赤坂さんにはちょっと想像もつかないでしょうがね。
The man-eating demons, as the price for violating the sanctity of their village, kidnapped the minister's grandson and swallowed him whole. The ludicrous idea flew through my head. It was so absurd, I was half disgusted with myself. Oiishi was just teasing me. Stupid. It was all really so stupid. Come to think of it, by then I might have already been seized by the curse of that dubious village. For me to realize that would take a little more time. Oh, fascinating. So he does learn about the curse eventually. He feels he gets cursed. That's an interesting little tidbit. But he's not dead. So there's that much going for him. Oh my gosh, there's 4 of them. So they do have a tips section, and we're gonna jump into all of these. Oh, some of those land of demons, travel to Hinamizawa. All right, let's view all the new tips. Oh, we got 4 of them. They look spicy. First, phone call with Yukie. Oh, that's his wife. Whenever I headed on an assignment, she would ask where. Not just Yukie, but anybody would ask the same question. It was a cold place. She would urge me to pack a thin jacket. If it were far, she'd warn me to be careful on the drive over. It was just normal everyday concern that led me to ask such an obvious thing. I felt sad I couldn't answer such a run-of-the-mill question.
Suman, Yukie.
Aw, she sounds very sweet. Yukie laughed as though she had realized something. At times like this, Yukie had a magical power to see right through me.
からかうなよ。寂しがるような年じゃないさ。
That's not true, you're never too old.
さてさていかがでしょう。あなたは本当に甘えん坊さんですからね。私と一緒でないとだんだん弱気になってきてしまうのでしょ。
Oh my gosh. She's such a sweetie.
もう。今、ユケイの頭に小悪魔の角がにょっきりと生えているのが目に浮かぶよ。君は昔から。
はぐらかさないはぐらかさない。私に構ってもらえなくて寂しい寂しいって。あなたが尻尾を振っている音が受話器を通しても聞こえてきますよ。
She's a devil, he's a dog. The side of Yukie wasn't something you could guess existed from seeing her usual modest behavior, and it was something that she didn't show to anybody else but me. Normally, I'd poke her to hide my embarrassment and bring to an end to the conversation, but I couldn't do that over the phone. Of course, Yukie was clever. She was teasing me because of that.
あなたを困らせるのがこんなに楽しいと気づいたのはいつからだったでしょうね。
そろそろ許してくれよ。とにかく君の元気な声が聞けてよかった。
そうでしょう。元気になれましたか？
I had called Yukie to keep her from feeling lonely when she was by herself in the hospital room. Of course, that was nothing more than a pretense that I, being shy, had come up with. It seemed that Yukie had long since seen through that act.
また電話をしてくださいな。私がダメな時はお父さんが相手をしてくれるでしょう。もっともお父さんが相手ではあなたのことだから電話先でも直立不動で喋っていそう。
Oh yeah, I'm sure, especially with how absent he's having to be for work. For a while longer, Yukie kept teasing me without letting me end the call. Aw, that's very sweet. Alright, a record of opening remarks. Chairman, XX. Members of the XX Party, congratulations are due as we are celebrating 25 years since our founding. These past 25 years have seen much growth in XX Prefecture. The once quiet scenery of nothing but fields now has seen openings of new stop on the bullet train. And with the development of the highway, we've seen a rebirth of modern city bursting with youthful energy. We've reaped the benefits of new businesses and industries, and with the special reverence and residents of XX Prefecture have a time-honored traditions. History and culture, business and industry. With these ideals in harmony, they have accomplished in growing the city into Japan's foremost metropolis. Of course, the development of XX Prefecture couldn't have happened without the growth of the XX Party. We are resolved to see each and every one of our campaign promises to fruition, reaching our targets definitively and expediently like arrows fired from a bow. But these arrows is a fundamental basis of the XX party. Our members have sought to pierce the obstructions preventing the happiness of the residents of the XX prefecture. But I do believe that everyone here is unlike an ordinary arrow. While being an unflattering and straightforward, we have not neglected in seeking solutions that conform to the current day and age, while also keeping an eye on the future. An arrow once loose can only be fly to its destination. Everyone here, however, is no simple arrow. Even once loose from the bow without neglecting our studies, while employing new methods, and implementing more effective and flexible ideas, thus being able to change trajectories mid-flight, we are magical arrows. The modern age marches ever forward. Sometimes it marches faster than the time taken from planning to execution. If that's not true, look at AI. The following part was not in the script. It's as though it had been ad-libbed by the minister. For example, there have recently been numerous problems with the Hinamizawa power plant project. Rather than forcing through the project solely because it was decided upon by the government, it's necessary to reflect on and adjust the never-ending changes needed of the residents, the region, and the next generation. The protests by the local residents that surround the Hinamizawa Dam, these are also the will of the people of the XX prefecture. If you feel that there's no need to listen because the project has already been finalized, then you do nothing more than shed a poor light on Japan's post-war democracy. The following is as per the script. For the lasting happiness of the citizens of Japan and the residents of the XX prefecture, please consider these policies thoroughly. I believe, however, we've all gained something from the flexibility and foresight of the XX party. I've taken much of your time. However, allow me to say the following to celebrate the 25th anniversary of our founding. Chairman XX, members of the XX party in attendance, thank you very much for today. From the opening remarks of the XX party prefectural forum on the 25th anniversary celebration. So he basically was forced to have that very specific snippet in his like addressing of the opening remarks because of the pressure he was under, and to the point where it wasn't even part of like this teleprompter script, but he added it in. It had to specifically name drop Hinamizawa. Gears and fire and the taste of honey. The world is filled with people blessed with relationships. Of course, that doesn't mean that everyone is connected to each other. It's obvious that on the other side of the planet, there are people laughing and crying who can't possibly have an effect on you. However, in the extremely limited community of the neighborhood, that sort of connection is just a matter of fact. It's quite possible that a single remarkable event could have massive consequences inside a small community. If you were to increase this in scale, the perfect stranger on the other side of the globe might become enough of a legend to have an effect on our lives. Well, it's not always that way. Like I said at the beginning, the links between people basically aren't that relevant in the grand scheme of things. Whether some household nearby is having a steak or croquette does not matter to me. When I put on my shoes, it doesn't matter to anyone whether I put the right one on the first or the left. This much an average person can understand. But actually, in reality, this is the truth. The bonds between people are quite well defined. It's not just a matter of distance, but being far or near. For example, let's say the person A's actions have some effect on me. Even then, person B's actions could have absolutely no consequence on my life. The reverse also holds true. Just because my actions affect person A, that doesn't always mean that they affect person B as well. Let's put it bluntly. If the bonds between people are like gears in a machine, the gear that represents me meshes with some people but is isolated from others. There are some who would try arguing against this. I like how it's a music box that's playing in the background. They even have like the crank turning. So they're using this as an analogy. There are some who would try to argue against this. Those people would bring up the example of gears in a clock. Each gear indeed only directly meshes with one or two others. However, if you rotate one gear, the one next to it moves, which connects to the next one, and the next, and in the end, all the gears are moving. There's a logic behind this, more than enough to convince an average person. Why is the argument convincing? The answer is simple. The relationship between people are ambiguous and can only be described conceptually. How the gears are connected, how their movements and chained together, can't be used in a fundamental explanation, so it throws a wet blanket on the argument. So for the people who like that explanation, I'll use the example of a clock again and refute it. First of all, to say this world is a singular clock would be wrong. That is, there isn't only one clock. There exist many clocks in the world, each counting their own time. If you think about it, the idea of this world as just one big clock is the height of arrogance. Even if you use the analogy of gears to explain human relationships, then you should be able to explain it using the analogy of multiple clocks unrelated to a single gear. Neighbors A and B. A is a gear in the same clock as me, so it's best to remain civil. B is a gear in a different clock, so it doesn't really matter to me at all. That's the kind of clear distinction I'm talking about. Fetch, that's so freaking true. It's like the whole idea of like knowing like atrocities or crimes or like violations, slavery, the terrible things can happen. It's like you're far enough removed where it's happening in another clock. It's super easy to be dismissive of that. Be like, whatever, it's their own problem, let them deal with it. But then if something even slightly similar happened in your community, it would be the most horrific, disturbing thing you'd ever thought of, because you were now associated with and affected by it directly. We should be a lot more connected, though. You want to say I'm being fallacious? Then let's change the analogy to something more familiar so you can understand. You probably heard of the phrase, a fire on the opposite shore, sometime in your life, no? For example, if your neighbor's house was on fire, you'd probably try to help put it out, wouldn't you? It'd be awful if the fire spread to burn down your own house, after all. But what if that fire was in a town the opposite side of the river? Would you still go out of your way to help? You wouldn't, would you? Even though it would be the wrong thing to do, there's no way the fire could spread to your own house. Even if it turned into a huge conflagration, there's no relationship between the houses that will spread the fire to yours and those that won't. With this basic example, you should be able to see the difference between gears that are and aren't related on your own. Having said that, still a lot to think about, even with the rivers to divide it. The other thing that's kind of cool is, like, I like the analogy of the clocks, about how we're like gears. We're gears in a clock, but we're also part of like different clocks. Because like that's like the idea is that the world's full of clocks, but the clocks, we try to keep them all synchronized to each other. So they seem to be connected in the vaguest sense because they convey information the same way. They operate under the same mechanics, but they also are distinct from each other. One clock running slow doesn't mean that other clocks in the area are going to run slow. But you can see that they're related still, that they're correlated still. And what would happen if all the clocks were all running different times? Would we be able to, like, if we don't coordinate those times, if we don't have a set way to like determine a way to agree what the right time should be, then the clocks would become useless. So the majority of the clocks need to maintain the same time and need to be like set at like the same regulations, keeping, and everything. So like they have to be related, and what affects one clock can affect another, but it's a distant relationship because it has to be with compliance and conformity and agreement on some basic fundamentals. That's actually a really, really good analogy of people and the way they're connected to each other. I really I like that. After all, it's not a spatial problem like being on the other side of the river, is it? All right. I don't know why they have like a big blood stare here for like the fire, the gears and fire and the taste of honey. And they didn't mention anything about the taste of honey. That's weird. That one's a very strange one. I think there's a lot more to that one. Maybe there's like a part 2 to it or something. But there's something to that one. That was very interesting. And then the chick in the trunk, which sounds terrifying. The card stopped. But he didn't know any more than that. For not only was he blindfolded, but locked in the trunk of a car. How could people become this powerless just by being robbed of their sight? He absolutely wouldn't have known this without experiencing it firsthand. He soon realized it was pointless to try and undo his bonds, with the confines of the trunk quickly making him lightheaded. He had no choice but to let his mind, the mild torture dull his senses. That's why when the car stopped, an unpleasant vibration ceased as the engine was killed. He couldn't help but delude himself that he was being set free, even though nothing had been resolved in reality. Of course, he was soon removed from that delusion. He strained his ears when he heard one of the men who had abducted him, and the older man was hearing for the first time, strike up a conversation.
お疲れさんです。ヒナはトランクに。騒ぎすぎで多少衰弱してるようですが、ご命令通り、傷一つつけちゃいません。
It's funny because like in English, a chick would refer to a girl, but I think in this case they're using the word chick as like a child. Which is funny because like that's an interesting choice of word, but maybe like there's a reason for it.
おう、手間はかけましたの。
The trunk opened, letting in a blast of fresh, cold air. Even though up until now it had been thinking about getting out of the stuffy trunk, when it was actually opened, he suddenly became uneasy. Enough so that he wished that the lid of the trunk would once again close, separating himself from them. Suddenly somebody stroked his head. Of course, since he was blindfolded, he couldn't tell if the hand was petting him or simply evaluating how easy it would be to remove his scalp. Unable to tell the difference, he could only freeze as he imagined the worst-case scenario.
吸っ
ったらん。愛そうにの。おとなしくしばらく過ごすがよかろう。
The older man said that kindly as he gently stroked the boy's head.
本に辛い思いしちゃろな。だがな。おんめのおじいちゃんは優しい人だね。すぐに助けてくれるだろうの。
Having heard nothing but the average standard dialect his whole life, the older man's distinct intonation left a deep impression on the boy. But he had no idea what he was saying. For your gramps to register as the meaning of your grandfather took a while to process. Eventually, the hand that was stroking his head loosened the blindfold.
目隠しはまずいっすよ。面が割れると後々まずいです。
あ？そうかの。なんら、せめて猿靴はくらい外したらんな。これぎゃ、息もできんね。
叫ばれたらまずいです。こいつのことは、俺たちに任せてください。
たく、気の利かんやっちゃらな。本家にむごい仕打ちは戦議やっちゃっとる。
Interesting.
そこんとこ、肝に刻むんよ。
わかってます。手荒な真似はしませんよ。小僧がおとなしくしててくれる分にはね。
The man's hand prodded roughly and repeatedly as the boy's head. A rugged hand, unlike the affectionate one that had been stroking his head before. Just stay cooperative. If you struggle, there's no guarantee what will happen. That cliche threat was literally beaten into his head. All right. And I think that's where we're going to end things for today. I'm kind of glad I didn't make that push to try and finish this chapter because it was very long. But I wonder if now they're going to be a lot shorter because they've kind of like got all the setup going. Very interesting. And it's kind of cool to see that, like, so yeah, they got the kidnappers who kidnapped the kid, right? But there's very clearly like different levels of like compliance. Like the initial kidnappers, obviously they're very much like just strict to the rules, do what we're told. But hey, if we have to, we can rough them up. They have no qualms with beating up a kid if they had to, which is crazy. But then they're handing him over to an older fellow who's got a very old, like, kind of country dialect, and he's very much more on the compassionate side. He's like, man, it's almost more like he's resigned to the fact that this is a necessity, but he doesn't like it at all. He, like, really wants to be more compassionate and caring and be more reasonable. I wonder if he could be our informant as well. So he's complying with everybody, but maybe he also wants to see this end, and so he's willing to work with the police in the background, and that's going to be what gets them in trouble. We'll have to see. I don't know. Got lots of interesting theories to go on. But I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Hope you appreciate it. Again, just a brief stay. There will be a break next week because I was able to acquire tickets to a convention I really want to go to. And because that'll eat up basically all my free time, I'm going to be gone and won't be able to record. So just keep that in mind. But overall, I'm very excited about that. It's very fun to be able to do. It's nice to be able to take some time to kind of do stuff for me and not be sick. I know I've like had lots of reasons to be gone lately, but you can't control when you get sick, and it's very infrequent when I get to do something for fun. The last thing I did that was big was the big trip in the summer. Granted, again, of course I'm gonna like myself take vacations. It's just the way things are. But yeah, it'll mean that things will slow down a little bit, which sucks because this is a great time to be making content because a lot of people have a lot of extra time. But I think we'll do something really spicy for the end of the year because, again, it's a pretty fun anniversary this time of year. I initially started this channel in December, so it's always fun to try and do something clever for that. Anyway, hope you enjoy yourselves. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for being a part of the channel. I will post pictures of the convention if anything interesting happens there, just to keep kind of everybody in the loop about it. But, you know, when all's said and done, it's just going to be a good time. So thank you so much, and until next video, watching me up, see me in next. I'll see you there.